We've all got to be very excited about how strong the economy is and how strong the level of employment is, and that when the economy surges, the people, the groups that are last hired and first fired are disproportionately the beneficiaries. What I think we have to worry about, we don't know how it's going to unfold, is we put an enormous amount of stimulus into this economy, and we, as a consequence, in addition to stimulating the economy a lot, we stimulated inflation a lot. And so if you look at people's purchasing power, the purchasing power of workers, it's a few percent below where a trend would have suggested it would be coming from 2019. And if you look at inflation, it is still too high. And that's why economic satisfaction isn't where we'd like it to be if you ask middle class Americans. And so the Fed now has a very, very difficult challenge of trying to achieve a soft landing for this economy. I think the chances that they'll succeed are better than I would have judged a few months ago, and that's very gratifying. But I think there are still substantial challenges ahead, both with respect to the purchasing power of the incomes of people who are working and of the risks of being able to bring the economy to a soft landing. But I've certainly been gratified by the way the data has come in over the last several months, and I think Americans should in general be. But I see some of the commentaries suggesting that we're out of the woods, that markets are going to be strong forever, that the job's already been done, that we can count on a soft landing. That's a bit of a rosy scenario view. So I'm afraid, Andrew, that I have to judge the cup neither empty nor full at this point, but maybe a little fuller than I would have judged several months ago.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. The thinking back to the discussions on the economy during the days of the administration and sitting around that cabinet table, I was always quizzical. Biden, put it in recent times, Biden passes the CHIPS bill. Biden passes the Inflation Reduction Act, which was really a great title, but didn't have much to do with inflation reduction. There's a infrastructure bill with infrastructure funding, which I greatly believe in, not just as an economic stimulant, but because we have to do it. You're in and out of New York. You see the new LaGuardia airport we built. We're rebuilding Kennedy Airport. We built what's called the Moynihan Station, which they had talked about for 30 years, upstate airports, Second Avenue subway. Not as much as I didn't do it as a governor, as an economic generator, more because these will make you more economically successful later on. The CHIPS bill, the right direction. But the quizzical point was, do these things really make a difference in the overall economy, or was the economy going to move the way it was going to move, whether or not those things had happened? Is there a cause and effect from CHIPS, Inflation Reduction Act, to the movement of the economy, or was it the Fed and the interest rate and the global circumstances?
I have to say, my friend, I greatly appreciate and admire everything you did for LaGuardia Airport. But there is something I wonder about in the United States. The newer the airport, the longer the walk to the gate. And that never feels like progress to me. But every time I go into a beautifully new renovated airport, it's a longer hike to the gate than it used to be through the old grungy airport. And that does make me wonder slightly about progress. And I think it's something that infrastructure world ought to think about. Look, I think there are two parts to it. I think that a lot of what drove the economy was a kind of natural rhythm coming off of COVID. I'm recording this from the town I live in during the summer on Cape Cod, Truro, Massachusetts. There's a kind of rhythm to economic life in Truro. The number of people working, the GDP, it goes down by about 50% between September and March or April of every year. Our economy had a phenomenon kind of like that after COVID. COVID was kind of like a big winter, and the big winter ended, and there was a natural recovery. You have to recognize that that's a fair part of what was going on. And in some ways, I think we probably overstimulated the economy because we under-recognized that. And that's part of the reason why we got the inflation we got. But on the other hand, Andrew, I do think that we're going to leave some really important things behind here. I think the investments we're making in infrastructure in our country are quite fundamental. I think it's going to turn out that by subsidizing renewable power in a lot of ways, we're going to turn out to be able to do things and do a lot of these things more cheaply than anybody ever imagined. You know, the history of the environmental movement is pretty strong, that when you say you have to do something, you figure out how to do it cheaper. There's this really interesting difference between environmental things and other things. When we estimate how much a weapon system is going to cost, it always ends up costing much more than we thought. When we estimate building a new sports stadium or a new subway, it costs much more than we thought. In the environment, it's tended to be the other way. Things have tended to be much cheaper than we expected. And it's not hard to think of the reason. The people who make the cost estimates in the case of the weapon system are the people who want to do it, so they come in low. The people who make the cost estimates in the case of the environment are the industry that doesn't want to do it, so they come in high. And the surprises happen that way. So I think it's a combination of both, but I certainly think we've made some really important investments. What I do hope, though, is that in our focus on job creating and those things, we don't lose sight of the importance of cost. And cost is absolutely central. People's incomes are really how much cash they take in divided by what the prices of the things they buy are. And if we lose sight of costs, we're losing sight of what people's real incomes are. And that can be a big mistake. Of course, we should be resilient with respect to China, but I actually think we should have the cheapest steel we can in the United States. 100 times more people work in the steel industry, work in industries that use steel as work in the steel industry. I think it's really important to have cheap steel. I think it's really important to think about having low cost inputs. And that's the thing where I'd like to see Bidenomics refocus. I'd like to see us focus on keeping down the costs so people's incomes can be higher.
No, that's a great point. It's both ends of the equation. Um, Also on the energy renewable, on the chips idea, and the infrastructure. Believe it or not, I am skeptical of government's ability to actually get things done. I would have liked to see what we did in the Clinton administration, which was make it a competitive process for the governments that can actually get the money in the ground the fastest. Bill Clinton got this as a former governor. I was HUD secretary. We had governments that had unspent money going back 6, 7, 8 years because they just weren't that quick at actually getting things done. And there was no incentive to get things done. You know, state of New York gets $100 million, you put it in the bank, you spend it when you can spend it. What we did with Clinton, the whole empowerment zones, it was a competition that said to governments, if whoever can use it and use it well and use it fast, and that was the idea of more of an economic stimulus. I would have liked to see that more in the Biden plans than actually was present. But I agree with your point. On a point of defensiveness for LaGuardia, first, the story of how LaGuardia happens. Vice President Biden, step back, LaGuardia was in terrible shape forever. And there was nothing that could be done with it because it was an operating airport. You couldn't stop the operations, and it's one of the smallest airports in the United States. So to do any major work and operate the airport was all but impossible. Vice President Joe Biden lands at the airport. And this is when he was vice president, and he had a little bit more license than as president. Vice President Biden says, if you were blindfolded and landed at LaGuardia Airport and took off your blindfold, you would think you were in a third world country. And all the elected officials in New York go nuts. How dare you say that about LaGuardia Airport, third world country? How dare you? You know, all that New York arrogance, machismo came full-throated. So they come to me, and I said, Vice President was right. He was right. LaGuardia is an embarrassment to New York. That's our front door landing at LaGuardia. So I actually used that as an impetus to do the reconstruction. I would like to say the long walkways combine air travel and a new health plan that incentivizes you to walk longer distance. Yeah, it's you now go to a plane, you walk a mile and a half. In the case of LaGuardia, because it was so small, and we needed more ramp area, landing area, that's why you have longer gates. But also what we did with LaGuardia, Larry, we went through a phase where public works were government was so disrespected that public works were almost utilitarian and devoid of any architectural significance, right? Build it as cheaply as you can, cinder block construction. I went back to the old theory of the FDR, the New Deal. We're building things that are going to last for generations. Your grandchildren are going to be going through LaGuardia. Build something that shows the national pride and something that shows the spirit. And LaGuardia, if I must say so myself, we took a lot of time with the design and the architecture, all cost effectively. Next time you get off Amtrak, go through Moynihan train station. It is magnificent. But otherwise, the long walk won't kill you. It'll keep you in good shape. Let me ask you this. The political situation. Bill Clinton, it's the economy, stupid. We can sit here and talk economic statistics all day long. What we learned with Bill Clinton is it's what the people believe and feel. Okay. And it's what made Clinton Clinton, because in his election, the economy was coming back. People just didn't feel it yet, and he won the election. What happens with day-to-day indicators of the market for people? What's going to happen with the stock market? What's going to happen to my 401k over the next year and a half?
It is hard to know, in all honesty. I think that there is still a quite significant chance that the economy will have at least some kind of slowdown in 2024. I think from a purely political perspective, from the point of view of Democratic elected officials, the economy may be being a bit too triumphant, a bit too soon here in 2023. On the other hand, things could well keep going as they've been, and people have been positively surprised for the last months. The economy, people were very worried that the economy wouldn't make it past the banking crisis that took place, and it seems to have absorbed that without difficulty. So there's clearly a lot of robustness, but I, for one, am a little bit apprehensive about premature euphoria as we think about what's happening in the economy. And I think if people can just stay focused on the fundamentals, that's probably the right thing from here.
When you were at Harvard University, we had many conversations. You were kind enough to have me up there at the Harvard Kennedy School. I know how you feel about diversity and inclusiveness, not just as a social concept, but also for the good of the academic experience. And this Supreme Court, which never ceases to surprise and dismay, now had a devastating opinion, in my opinion, on affirmative action. What can universities and what should universities do now?
Universities should double down on opportunity for everyone who's been left behind in this country, whatever their race, whatever their situation is. It's time to end preferential admission for legacies. It's time to end preferential admission for people who are very good at aristocratic sports, where they had tens of thousands of dollars paid for coaching or equipment when they're young. It means it's time to end early admissions practices which turn out to benefit the sophisticated and the privileged. It means that it's time for our elite institutions to shed the mentality of a country club that defines its greatness by how many people are excluded rather than by how many people are included, and grow the size of their classes so that they can educate and reach more people, or at least keep pace with the growing population that our country has had. They should use the power of distance education to reach much larger numbers of students, even those who can't come to their campuses. Instead of just having extension schools for the local communities, they need to have extension schools to the world. I'm so proud of my wife, who was a professor of English at Harvard and who has retired from Harvard and moved to Arizona State University, where her mission is to make a television show and to make courses on poetry that will reach much larger audiences than would ever sit in one of her classes at Harvard. And finally, I think our great universities need to commit themselves in a serious way to nurturing all the talent in our nation's public schools by designing curriculums, by training teachers, by doing research on the best ways that children can learn, by encouraging their graduates to go into the most important work of our society, which is often teaching. Because, Andrew, I'm convinced that, the Duke of Wellington said after the Battle of Waterloo that it had been won on the playing fields of Eton, Britain's most prestigious prep school. The battle for America's future, for our national security, for our prosperity, is going to be won or lost in our public educational institutions. Our Head Start program, our K through 12 public schools, our community colleges, and everyone, and especially those in our most privileged educational institutions, need to sign up for that battle. If our universities respond in the right and vigorous way to this decision, as wrong as it was, it can mark a turn towards an era of profound progress for our country. And that's what I hope we will see. I was so proud during the time that I was president at Harvard to establish the principle that subsequently other colleges followed, that anyone with a family income under $60,000 wouldn't have to pay anything at all. Their family, not borrow money, not nothing, in order to come to Harvard. But ultimately, that was really the right thing to do, and I'm so glad to have done it. There are 3.5 million 18-year-olds in the United States each year. And what we've done to prepare them and what we do to launch them is going to be the test on which our country's future will be measured.
Secretary Summers, I couldn't agree more. It is so well said. And that is my hope. It's my hope that the universities now actually get more creative and more effective in achieving those goals. But you said it so well. That's why you are really one of the outstanding public servants in this period in history. And I believe that. And also such a good citizen with such a good heart, good soul, and you're making a difference. And that's what it's all about. You're using your time to make this place a better place, and you've done that in an extraordinary way. And it was so kind of you to take time to be with us. I miss you. I'm proud of you. I watch your exploits. Keep going, Secretary Summers. We need you. We need you. God bless.
Thank you.